Thank you, dear rectors. Thank you very much for your supportive role concerning Portuguese language, Portuguese literature, Portuguese lecturing here in both universities. Thank you. And thank you for so many Portuguese that have studied here for long. And I hope some are still here today. I'm not sure. Is there any Portuguese? 1, 2, 3, 4. We are shy. So little by little, well, okay, you're there. Well, the Minister for Foreign Affairs, himself a scholar, professor. And dear MPs we have here in our delegation, besides our ambassador here in Brussels and the Belgian ambassador in Lisbon, we have MPs representing all the parliamentary groups existing in our parliament, from far right to far left. So we have now starting with far left, left-wing bloc and Communist Party, then Socialist Party now with absolute majority in the parliament since the last election, Social Democratic Party, Liberal Initiative, and Chega. Means it's enough. It's a translation. Well, so here we are. I'm very, very honored. I was told to speak about 15 minutes. I try to. I'm not sure if I won't be a little bit longer. And to speak in English, as I cannot yet speak in Flemish. Je suis francophone de formation. Ensuite, j'ai fait un parcours en allemand. Et I tried once to speak in Flemish. I did it politically with several sentences and several speeches, but not enough for a class. Well, so, and then I wait for your questions. I'm so honored and so happy for being at home. Home in a university. Home in a prestigious university. Home in Belgium, in Brussels, where most of our brotherly friendship began 600 years ago. Home in the center of Europe, Europe itself center of what we wish and never give up, wishing free, open-minded, universalist, humanistic, sustainable, developed world. Europe after 2024 elections is today's subject of debate. Let me start with a short retrospective of the world and of Europe in last century. Before the First World War, an Eurocentric world, but with an historic division into continental empires and oceanic empires, and very few emerging new states in Central and Eastern Europe. Outside them, USA, Latin American republics, China and Japanese empires. The rest of the world thus living under the European colonial empires. Between the end of World War I and World War II, no international order at all. Powerful continental empires like the Austro-Hungarian and the Russian had fallen apart. Russian Revolution, followed by fascism and Nazism, together with economic crisis, put an end to 19th century pure liberal parliamentarism and led to another global conflict. Meanwhile, USA had appeared as a world power, and the so-called Society of Nations, still attached to an Eurocentric concept, failed to understand that the next superpowers were outside its narrow, self-centered vision. Both USA and Soviet Union did not belong, or the second left, the Society of Nations. From 45 till 89, time, date of the Berlin Wall fall, the world was bipolar or bilateral. The two great strategic winners of the war, USA and Soviet Union split the world into two spheres of influence. The other three winners of the very same war, either watching the end of their empires, United Kingdom and France, or having to fight for some growing autonomy from its elder great brother, Soviet Union, case of China. The so-called Third World, or later on called non-allied, was swinging between a specific space of maneuver and close ties with Soviet Union and China. Of course, Europe had not disappeared, but until the end of the 50s, existed just as a sum of countries, not a world power. It took a while to be born, to grow, to start its long journey, economic first, political much later on, to become a real power. And this started with the treaties of Paris and Rome in 52 and 58. The turn of the century and the beginning of this one was supposed to be a period of a single superpower, USA. With the implosion of Soviet Union and the impossibility of a successful negotiation between NATO, European Union, and the Russian Federation, this one became, little by little, just a regional power, no longer a global power. It was a downgrading hard to accept. China, at the same time, emerged economically, but not yet as a military and politically superpower. The same, even more obviously, happening with India, economically very powerful, but always very introverted. Brazil and South Africa confronting internal critical cleavages. But this unipolar international order did not last for very long. So the second decade of the 21st century appeared as a unique occasion for multipolarism, multilateralism, reform of the United Nations and other universal organizations, addressing the reality of new powers in other continents, and what was obvious, the outdated framework corresponding to 45 and the aftermath of World War II. This multilateralist expectation failed, as Trumpism and its protectionist, almost isolationist approach refused or postponed international cooperation in the new fields ahead: climate change, oceans preservation, energy transition, digital and sustainable development. The erosion of USA-EU economic partnership, the vocal war between USA and China, the objective coalition Trump-Putin against the already fragile European political systems, and the double administration in USA, on one hand the classic, and on the other hand the presidential, along with the asymmetric management of the pandemic, made the 2016-2020 a period or an era of unpredictable, casuistic, not to say chaotic, mix of an erratic USA, a downgraded to Russia, betting on an indirect intervention through cyber, financial and destabilizing actions in Europe, Near and Middle East and Africa, an apparently stronger and stronger China, an enlarged and more ambitious Europe. But having lost UK and showing signals of urgent need of renewal in political, economic and social systems. The invasion of Ukraine and the terrorist attack on Israel were born in this context, based on the assessment, the first of them, of a wavering USA and a weaker transatlantic relation, a still full Russian capacity of self-upgrading, a Chinese increased strength, leading the BRICS, and in the middle of the BRICS, Russia, no longer being Russia the leader of a certain area, but beginning China to become the leader of that area of thought and strategic action. And finally, the vital role of realignments in the Islam. Dear students, and Europe, having become a global power in the 80s and 90s of last century, resisted to the Brexit and Trumpist opposition, and enlarged and led relevant issues like climate change, what challenges is Europe obliged to face? I will be short and assertive. First of all, let us speak of the permanent goals of Europe, coming from its roots and metrics: peace, European security, liberty, human rights, rule of law, democracy, social justice, or welfare state, if you prefer. Then, after complex and almost ineffective debates whether to enlarge the communities or rather to deepen integration, political reality forced the communities and then European Union to successive waves of enlargement. South and southeast flank imposed Greece, Portugal, Spain as new member states. Central and Nordic consolidation explained the next wider step. Soviet implosion accelerated Eastern massive accessions. Now, the war in Ukraine and the eternal drama in Western Balkans make unavoidable new accessions to try to ensure stability and peace in Europe. But asking for a good preparation and depending on each candidate's ability in fulfilling the due requirements. So, as I said, when I visited, not far away, Ukraine, and President Zelensky heard it, it means hard work for the candidates and hard work for European Union to prepare the conditions for this accession. Meanwhile, deeper integration became inevitable. This means that the European Union, at the same time that was enlarging, was deepening its involvement in new challenges: climate change, oceans, innovation, new technologies, artificial intelligence, digital, energy, here with the help of the war. Because some countries, which was the case of Portugal, started before with renewables. Other countries had to wait to see the aftermath of the war in Ukraine, first phase, to start an energetic transition. Foreign policy, with the transatlantic relation at the core of it. Euro and financial governance, like defense policy and migrations, have been splitting European members, justifying present or future circles of reinforced cooperation. Meaning that perhaps in the future, as in the present with the euro, in some fields, European Union will have different circles of reinforced cooperation. Other challenges impossible to adjourn for a global power, like European Union, are renewed and reinforced partnerships with Africa, Latin America, and Asian Pacific. Europe cannot go on blaming migrants without admitting we must have a partnership with Africa and other regions where those migrants are coming from, and be concerned with the instability that is growing, both economic, social, and political instability in those regions. Permanent adjustments of strategies concerning powers such as China, India, Japan, or Brazil. Last but not the least, political systems crisis. The so-called populisms and inorganic movements defy more and more European institutions. But it is harder to deal with this long-lasting problem, as the only way of avoiding those movements and parties is reforming obsolete political, economic, and social systems. Otherwise, the inorganic movements and the so-called populism will grow and grow. And even more difficult for the European institutions. It's not just an European problem. It's a problem of, it's a national and regional issue. The European level is inoperative or too late in tackling what was already there and had not been solved. I mean, European leaders do not come from Neptune, from another planet. No, they come from national state members. So it's very difficult to have strong European leaderships with very weak national leaderships, and have a strong European institutional system with weak national political, economic, and social systems. They ask for reform. And we are, in so many cases, late facing this challenge. Dear students, are the 2024 European elections going to be substantially a kind of a factor of change in this landscape just described? I don't think so. I don't think so. Probably they can put pressure on the deficits of European national political systems. Probably. I mean, in some countries where those systems are not working well, economically, socially, politically, then populist parties, inorganic movements will go up. Well, they could put pressure, those elections, on sensitive trends like aging of institutions and leaderships. I mean, the age in the leaderships of so many state members of the European Union are going up, up, up. The case of Portugal, I'm 75 almost, president. So I'm speaking against myself. But when democracy started, I was 20. At the time of the revolution, and I voted the constitution at the age of 25, 26. Now I'm 50 years older, and with me, some generations. We were 20 and 30. The great changes in history are made by the 20s and 30s, not by the 60s or 70s. Usually they get used to what they have, and they are happy with it, or at least they accept it as inevitable. So that's a problem in Europe. Aging in people, aging in institutions, aging in leaderships. Then people's fatigue. People get tired with the pandemic and one war, and now a crisis going on in between. Not forgetting the economic, social, and financial crisis. It's too much for less than a decade. And if we add the financial crisis that started in USA coming to Europe, then we have so many crises with the people's fatigue, and mostly in the younger generations. Then the lack of innovation, the hope of different alternatives, the need of new discourses, quicker solutions for education, healthcare, housing. Students, you do understand what it means, and clear policies on migration. I must say, my position is a very open-minded position concerning migrations, but I think it's a problem that Europe must tackle as a whole. Either accepting it's possible to have a common policy, or accepting it's not possible. So, some countries have a policy, and the others, in a way, don't have it, don't want it, but help those that have it, so that they can really achieve what they would intend to achieve. And of course, very important will be the way Ukrainian and Middle East conflicts will evolve, and national elections will show or not turnarounds. This could also play a role, because we'll have so many national elections in between, I mean, before the European elections or with the European elections, which is the Belgian case, that we cannot ignore the influence of what will be the evolution in Ukraine, what will be the evolution in the Middle East, not speaking of other situations of crisis that do not exist today, but also the evolutions in different countries. What we are living now is what we can call a perfect storm, involving at the same time structural and long-term world and EU challenges and decisive conjunctural challenges. All this in a very emotional and radicalized ambiance. So let us be rational. It's up to us, academic, to be rational. Control emotions, show wisdom, build bridges, open avenues of dialogue and moderation. The hour is not for the moderates today. It's much more for the radicals. So we, in centers of knowledge, of reasoning, must try to be rational, trying to understand the causes, the effects, and how to deal with them. Sticking always to values and principles, otherwise it's impossible. In my first class, every year I say, I was lectured to have just one profession throughout my whole life, living the very same place where I was born. This is over, for very long. I'm going to have different professions and activities. I can't even imagine how many and how and which and where. Far away from where I was born, very far away, and circulating in Europe and all over the world. So we must have references. Otherwise, it's difficult to make a judgment on anything. How shall I treat my colleague? How shall I do this in my profession or not, in politics, in society? Dealing with social problems. Well, I still think that the values of Europe and the principles of Europe are worth living. Human dignity, human rights, a humanitarian vision of the world. In a pluralistic way. That can mean different things for different people. Knowing that more Europe has been and will always be better than less Europe. Less Europe would mean chaos. And more than that, knowing that the world's balance of power needs Europe as a reference, an innovative moderator. Without Europe, climate change won't be an issue. Won't be. The other global powers didn't consider it an issue. United States, Russia, but it was a global power. China as a global power. This was not a vital issue for them. in the beginning of this journey. It still isn't, in a way. Your generation, that will be much longer than I will, and will be really the future, will therefore have the responsibility to find new ways, renewed alliances, new objectives, new trends, new policies to achieve peace, to build democracy, to renew democracy accepting what has changed in societies, new media, new labor forces, new mobilities, and then, of course, respect of human rights. This meaning not just personal rights, political rights, but social, economic, and cultural rights. Well, dear friends, now the floor is yours. So up to you to ask whatever you think you should. I tried to answer. I think it's not 15 minutes, but it was not too long, much longer than that.